In this video, I'm going to go over taurine's function as an osmolyte, as a core, like, hey, what's going on there, and why do we care about it for recovery and sporting performance? So, taurine as an osmolyte. Osmolyte meaning it's a compound which helps cells moderate or control their water balance, but it's not an electrolyte. So, why is that valuable? Well, a bunch of other things dependent on electrolyte concentration, like muscle contraction, etc. Bunch of like proteins, enzymes, all of these things. If you shift your electrolyte balance in that, then their function also changes. So you don't want that to be the only pillar of control, or I guess our bodies aren't designed for that to be the only pillar of control in terms of water regulation. So what you have is like electrolytes, as maybe you might call it, a foundational layer of water regulation. So they're still important. We don't disregard electrolytes, but osmolytes can function as like an extra layer of, particularly in cells or tissues in our body that can suffer a lot of sudden water stress or like metabolic stress that might shift things around, like electrolytes, or they spit out byproducts from making things, therefore kind of shifting like electrolyte function, etc. Those tissues, brain, skeletal, muscle, heart, really important tissues, they tend to use osmolytes in high concentrations. And one really big one is taurine. Actually, it is the biggest, well, not the biggest one, it is the most common. It's the one we use the most or have the most of. It's also conveniently the highest free-form amino acid in skeletal tissue, muscle tissue as well. So taurine all through our body, it is important. Our body already uses it. Our body makes it itself from cysteine and methionine. But if you know some of these other things, or other work I've talked about, so like glutathione synthesis is dependent on cysteine, and we don't have enough cysteine generally to keep up with the amount of glutathione synthesis our body wants to do. Henceforth, if you are trying to get to optimal high levels of taurine intake, then you can also bet that we don't have enough cysteine available there if we don't have enough cysteine available for these other things. It is a high in demand compound, cysteine. Same with methionine. Methionine is used in things like managing homocysteine and a bunch of other processes. Essentially, they're both used in a lot. We need to, if you really care about your performance, recovery, etc., to that degree, then I would be looking at what is my daily taurine intake, or what is my daily cysteine methionine intake? Like, are we really buffering that up to the maximum? It is most convenient to do that just from what is my daily taurine intake, though, in terms of covering that in base, and then you can cover cysteine and methionine and other readouts. So that's that. You can get taurine from multiple places, obviously, like in diet. Meats is big: fish, poultry, red meats. You can get taurine in there, taurine in a lot of supplements, taurine's even in some energy drinks, etc. If you're having a Monster every day, you're getting a little bit of taurine. I would look at pumping those doses up, though. So like doses of taurine, I quite like 5 gram plus. That's all a bit anecdotal, certainly feels good. It depends on your application. I think that's going to be a big one, and it depends on what sort of strains you're under. For example, in Hydromax, that has 5 grams per scoop, and if you are someone that deals with back pumps, and that's a really big problem, you're probably a larger individual for one, but often we're recommending 3+ scoops a day on that, so that would be 15 to 20 grams of taurine just from that Hydromax. So very context dependent. I would say, like, looking at the spread of evidence and a lot in sporting and performance, etc., like you've got a lot of research in that 1 to 2 gram range, and they do see benefit, especially if that's with consistent use. There is some evidence for one-off use being functional, but like we don't have as much evidence there. I'd say, hey, probably does have some value as one-off, but realistically, just be smart, just have a daily intake, treat it like creatine in that regard. 1 to 2 grams, good start. 5 grams, etc., if you want to get really serious. This is why you see it in a bunch of the Strom and AHL Labs products, though. So because we all regard it as like a really good foundation to maintaining cellular hydration. It's one of those building block, or it's one of those materials that your body just wants to have available, and it can use it as it wants, and it does preferentially use it. So things like your cardiac muscle, your heart, and well, cardiac muscle is heart, but your skeletal tissue and your brain, like they get some preferential treatment in terms of funneling more taurine there, because those are critical organs that we're trying to protect. We're trying to make sure the water balance in them is where it should be so that you don't have more damage. And that's kind of a follow-on. So why is it relevant to training performance and recovery? I would argue our most relevant, why you might see benefits, is down to it is maintaining the water concentration in cells that are critical. If you mess up the amount of water in a cell, then you're changing structure. Is a simple way of saying that. Therefore, you're creating damage. So by maintaining it around where, or letting our body regulate it where it wants to regulate it, means that it can prevent that damage occurring. And that is why in some of the literature you see it say like taurine mitigating inflammation-related damage, aka you create damage in your tissue with training that creates inflammation. Good, it's part of the process. We don't want that inflammation to carry on to the extent where the inflammation in itself is creating further damage, and that can be due to things like water balance issues and other increased oxidative stress, etc. So it's helping manage that, and I would say the main thing that I see when I'm reading around is that we're managing that purely just because we're helping with water balance. There is other functions of taurine, there's a whole bunch, but focus, main thing, taurine, water balance, that's what we should be thinking about. Dosing and timing, keep it regular. Dose, 1 gram minimum. I'd be in the few grams a day, that's my personal preference. And you see a lot of the products that we stock that do around that. And of course, if you're working with back pumps, and you know what that is, if you do, then you're pushing those doses up a lot higher, and that's where like the Hydromax is kind of special and very designed around that. I think 10 grams plus taurine for that is where I would say is a good start, and Hydromax has dandelion in there too, so you're doing some real water manipulation play there. Other products that have it, I'll drink Strom. The Introjuice, drink Strom, ready to drink Introjuice can. That's got 3 grams of taurine in every can. That's whopper. You know, your Monster's what, got 1 gram? This has 3. Water, 1.5 grams, I believe. HR Labs, I better check. Proven, it'll be in that same, I believe. Proven's at 2 grams. And then Hydro EAA is something like 1 and 1.5 grams, somewhere around there. So the HR Labs range has a bunch. That's it. If you end up stacking a few products, you could easily get into that few gram range. Or if you just take something like Introjuice by itself, you're getting 3 grams daily by itself. Like that's why we formulated it there. So it's a decent range that just having one of those cans a day has you pretty covered for general normal folk use. All right, over and out. Any questions at all, don't hesitate to shoot it in. You can send out a message wherever the hell this is, or you can email it at thomas@stromsports.co.nz. I'm a big fan of taurine. I've done a lot of research and writing around taurine, and we have an article out on the website now that goes into a bit more depth on the taurine here, and that was written for HR Labs. So there's a little bit of HR Labs focus there, but taurine is taurine. You can get it anywhere. Done.